Hello, hello.
Hello.
Hi, everyone. Hey, Jason. While we wait for people to sign in, how is your February going, Jason?
It's going great. Just got back from Barcelona and Dublin, so had a nice little holiday break, inclusive of an ERG board meeting. So refreshed and excited to kick off our new fiscal year.
Oh, that sounds fantastic. Barcelona is one of my favorite cities. It is so stunning. Did you have a good time? Was
Absolutely.
the weather good?
Weather was fantastic. Our office there overlooks the water, which is also very, very, very nice. And
Oh,
yeah, it was a great time and plenty of tapas. Let me just say that.
I'm so jealous. Well, people are quickly joining and getting in. So let's get started, everyone. My name is Amit Bhatia. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Data People. Thank you for being here with us today. Every month, we host a fireside chat with some of the most visionary, thoughtful, talent leaders around. And we ask them for tactical tips for things that they've figured out in their organizations that other recruiting leaders in the community can use, can leverage, and can immediately put to action. Today, I'm really lucky. I'm joined by one of my favorite leaders, Jason Swinton, who runs go-to-market recruiting at Autodesk. And today, we're going to talk a little bit about what he's figured out in optimizing go-to-market hiring in his career and at an amazing company like Autodesk. And we're going to talk about sort of actionable tips that you can do to make hiring more data-driven and unlock recruiting outcomes for you. And even if you're not in go-to-market recruiting, a lot of the tips we talk about today will be relevant for every other types of recruiting. So Jason, thank you for taking the time. Thank you for being here. Could you
Thank
tell us
you.
a little bit about Autodesk?
Yes, anything in the world that you design and make, our company might have touched it in the world of software development. And, we're obviously known for AutoCAD as our historical baby, but we are touching all sorts of various avenues across the SaaS space, and very fortunate to be here just over 2.5 years now, and just seeing the world of construction design and the things that we do as a company and the lives and things we change across the world.
No, that's fantastic. I read somewhere that both the World Trade Center, the one world, the new Freedom Tower in New York, right next to where I live, and the latest Tesla, both designed with Autodesk software. So I'm just like, it's everywhere you touch, isn't it? It's from an incredible company.
Absolutely, absolutely, and so much that even I'm still discovering in the journey of being here at 2.5 years. It takes a little bit of time to understand our entire portfolio, but so impressive to see all the things that we have helped companies design and make in the world.
That's fantastic. Jason, tell me a little bit about your career. You've been in go-to-market recruiting for a while, and but how did you find your way into recruiting? How did you find your way into go-to-market recruiting? What really excites you about
My career is a bit non-traditional. I would say that. I've spent the last 8 years in talent acquisition across both Autodesk and prior life Microsoft in the go-to-market space. And I've been very fortunate in my entire career to really touch the talent acquisition world as we've expanded teams, hired globally. And I really found that passion as I went out there to support talent acquisition in kind of that field recruiting support, to then move into leading a recruiting team at Microsoft, to then come to Autodesk. And I love the sales world. I love customer success. I love everything about go to market. It's always been something that I've been super passionate about. And I always think about such great talent that's out there in various fields that can come into a company like ours and accelerate their career. And it's been a wild ride over the last 8 years in hiring thousands, helping to hire thousands of employees across the globe, and so very fortunate to be in this space and doing what I do with my amazing team of recruiters and sourcers out there.
it? No, that's incredible. And you're alt life, olive oil entrepreneur. Tell us more, Jason.
Yeah, so outside of work, when I'm not doing the day job, my husband and I have an olive oil shop here in Arizona, and we've had that for about 5 years now. And it definitely teaches you a lot of discipline around not only thinking from a lens of a self-starter and being, that small business owner, to thinking about how we also attract and engage and hire folks to work with us and help us really, celebrate the world of olive oil and what it's all about, and how to really get customers to understand, how to really put it into their dishes at home and make it easy and fun. And it's been a fantastic journey, and we just celebrated 5 years of having our shop here in town, and it definitely keeps you busy from the
Wow.
storefront and online to farmers markets, you name it, we're present.
That's such a fantastic story. And I think there's nothing like the empathy you get from being a small business owner for, the challenges that every part of the organization faces. It's like a little microcosm. That's incredible. Now, the first question I'd like to ask all our guests before we get going with the actual topic is there a book that you've read that has changed the way you think about hiring, about organizations, about strategy, about decision making? So I'm kind of curious, Jason, what have you read lately that the audience can pick up on?
I have one that's historically been one that I've always recommended to folks I've worked with, and it's Great at Work, and it's by Morton Hansen, and I have this on my bookshelf, and it's one that I've come back to a few times because I think about how we optimize the work that we do, regardless of the field or industry we're in, and how we can really do more together and really, find our efficiencies within each other, not only as an individual contributor or as a people manager, but this is one book that I always have loved reading and rereading, and always this one that I love to recommend to folks at some point in their life to pick up and take a read at.
Oh, that is a great book. And I love the idea of like, how the decision making function, like what we don't really realize that, like how we get really great at our roles is that is what does it take? And actually, it reminds me of the other book that I also loved, which was sort of the From Good to Great, which is one of my favorite books way back when. It was just this idea that like how do we jump from being good enough to being truly spectacular? It's about prioritization, it's about strategy. And I think that's a little bit about what we're going to talk about today, go-to-market hiring. It's how does he take an organization that's good at hiring and make them exceptional at hiring? How do we really sort of focus on that? And so before, quick shout out to the audience. First of all, love some of the book recommendations that are coming through in the chat. But quick shout out to the audience. Are you in go-to-market hiring? And if so, raise your hands, tell us about it. What are you seeing? What are you hearing? What's the market telling you right now? I'd love to hear from you. We'd love to react to that in the chat. Keep this as interactive. We're all here to learn from each other. But my first sort of point that I wanted to make with a little bit of data was we hear a lot about how the market is getting easier for employer friendly, how we're sort of seeing, that it's easier to hire. And sometimes maybe your hiring managers are coming to you and they're like, oh, it shouldn't be that hard to hire. I'm reading all this stuff that the market's getting easier. And is it? And one of the areas where it's really, really hard, and we see that even in our data, is in go to market. That even now, when we've seen the relaxing of labor markets, and even labor markets are still tight, don't get me wrong, but you're seeing a relaxing of labor markets. But the areas where you see an enormous amount of tightness tends to be in shift and hourly wage roles. But amongst professional roles, where G&A has gotten a little bit more employer friendly, tech has gotten a little bit more employer friendly, go-to-market roles are still incredibly tight. And within that, sales roles are still incredibly tight. So when you're sort of hiring a sales leader or even a really quota-carrying AEs, great marketers, it is hard to, great candidates are getting multiple offers, offer acceptance rates are high. It is hard to sort of land that candidate and to hit your SLAs with your hiring teams. Jason, are you seeing that in your hiring sort of and I'm kind of curious what you're hearing and seeing on the ground.
We are. I think, we all recognize that there are a plethora of organizations that go through this transformational journey in both their sales organizations, customer success. And through that, we recognize that a lot of the really great talent in the marketplace is still very hot and very much, looking at not only one company, but probably two to three. And we are always not when you look at what the candidate's looking at, there's multiple things that they're experiencing that are obviously driving them towards the company they want to work for. And we definitely see that in the go-to-market space, it is a challenge, and sometimes based on location, based on budgets that certain organizations have, there is friction, and it's friction on both ends, both from the candidate side of what they're also going through with other companies and some of the counter offers that might be coming through, to what even the company that we're at, right, might be also experiencing with how we can bring that talent through.
And are you seeing sort of that tightness or that difficulty localized in certain types of jobs or certain types of geographies?
We are. I definitely feel that we see more today as we continue to expand in locations like Latin America. We definitely see that a lot of companies that are moving operations or expanding operations in those locations throughout all of Latin America are continuing to be more aggressive with their compensation packages. So candidates definitely have multiple options to consider when they're looking at, that next role if they're, in the marketplace.
No, that's right. So, and we're seeing that too across our data sets. It's like, with the contract, with sort of some of the tightness and sort of, the cost cutting, if you will, in the United States, a huge push to move workforce to the LATAM, to Eastern Europe, to different parts of Europe and even Asia. And you're starting to see suddenly those markets get very tight very fast. Comp levels get bid up, multiple offers. And so it's hiring, especially for a global organization like yours, starts to feel very, very, macroeconomic, if you will. Suddenly you've got to be sort of a policy pundit who's tracking international trends. So
Absolutely.
it's kind of, and this is the thing that I'm amazed at with talent acquisition is the number of different types of things that we have thrown at talent acquisition these last 4 or 5 years, from a pandemic, return to office, work from home, return to office, pay transparency, the globalization of so many of our departments, compliance needs, DE&I. It just feels like, and now like talent intelligence, it feels like every day recruiters and recruiting leaders have to retrain themselves and become really good at a whole different part of the org. And so with that, I kind of wanted to talk about the foundation, because in go to market, every day you don't have the role, it's lost dollars. It's like very, very acute, isn't it? You're If you don't have a role today, you're already starting to think about, am I going to be able to hit Q4's sales numbers? Am I going to be able to hit Q4's retention numbers? Because it's, these are very quickly translate to dollars and cents. And so you're dealing with also a very unique hiring manager profile, very data driven, often very demanding. And I'm kind of curious. So the first part of the conversation I want to talk about today, Jason, was setting up the foundations for success, for data driven success. How do you think about foundationally, you know, building your team? Is the makeup of a go-to-market recruiter that you're looking for with go-to-market recruiters, are they different than what you're looking for with an engineering recruiter, an executive recruiter, other types of sort of, other types of go-to-market, other types of recruiting function?
Great question. So I would say that first, we've had some historical success in thinking about folks that are coming in from the business itself. We've seen that when you can hire sometimes recruiters that have experience working for the organizations in which we recruit for, we often find they can really click into the understanding of the dynamics of what that organization experiences through its entire fiscal year, and knowing what are some of the pain points, what are the easy wins. And often we find that we can hire some of our recruiting teams on more potential and also blend that into our more seasoned set of recruiters that support go-to-market. And so through that blended experience, we have seen really great run rate success of just being able to quickly, learn everything talent acquisition and obviously adopt the tools that we use behind the scenes to then be able to have that really connected experience with hiring managers and even leaders that help enable us to move more efficiently and optimize in their organization when we go through that recruiting life cycle.
I really like that. One of the things that I'm kind of very curious about is, we is when we we built sort of this maturity model. And so Deloitte had this talent acquisition maturity model. I'm kind of curious if anyone in the audience is familiar with it, has seen this before. So we've been thinking a lot about what does that look like for today's environment? And what does that look like with products like Data People out there? Level one is, basic and transactional. You're trying to have an SLA, you're trying to meet that SLA, you're trying to be effective as a TA team. As TA teams evolve to level two, is about standardization, focus, consistency, habits, and hygiene. If you're a large organization like Autodesk, my guess is it's very hard to kind of put the entire org in a single level, different orgs, different geos, depending on what's the right fit for you at your right point of time. So this is not this list, this maturity model is not a judgmental list. There's nothing wrong with being in any different level. It's about what is appropriate for your org. Level three is where we start to get into integrated and evidence-based. And that's kind of where we're talking about today. I'd say in the last few years, Jason, you've taken your org at Autodesk and taken, what is great standard. You were the go-to-market side of things, especially, was very strong level two. Standardization, templating, hiring managers involved, engagement. And you've made that leap to being data-driven and evidence-based. And so a little bit, the first question I want to talk to you about there is, in order to do that, TA has to be part of the planning process. And I'm kind of curious, how do you do that? Like, how do you, I found this, and I hear this from other talent leaders, it's very hard to get involved early enough in the talent acquisition, in the planning process. So when the go-to-market team is building revenue goals, they often build the revenue goals, and then they'll come to a TA leader and be like, okay, I need 17 enterprise account executives, go fill these 17 recs. But you're already behind the ball. So how do you change that? Where do you participate in true planning?
Great question. So first I would say, what we've adopted in even more recent times is really setting up for success quarterly check-ins with the organizations we support. And we've often find that even when you can click into that organization one or two levels down, you tend to get more of the real talk of what's on the horizon. Is there potential risk with the current team that's in place today? And that really helps us have a more real view of what we can then go do behind the scenes with our sourcing teams, with our proactive recruitment requisitions that are live, to not only think about the job that is open right now, but is this job something that's going to also be on the horizon again within 3 to 6 months? And then we can start to back into that. So we continue to think about who's that silver medalist that maybe when we fill the one job, we can then backfill and have someone to stay warm and connected to for the next job. And we have found that's kind of a sweet spot of really optimizing on the workforce planning initiative, where sometimes it's not perfect, nor is it maybe great at every company and has it perfect, nailed down to a T. But we find that if we remain as proactive as possible, seek to understand what is happening 6 to 12 months from today, that backs us into the right level of partnership and activation through the various tools we can then go use to source and network and present that talent.
I like that idea a lot. So I'm kind of curious, and I want a few follow-ups. So you're doing the quarterly check-in at the leadership level. So it's your go-to-market head of TA with the head of sales, or the chief revenue officer, and then you've got sort of multiple levels of multi-threading. So the director manager level, you're meeting your counterparts in the business every quarter. Are you starting to then also pick up on things like quality of hire? Are the hires actually working out and driving value, or getting an early warning sign on backfills and attrition? This is going to be a problem that we're going to start a capacity plan on. Is that part of how do you construct the agenda for these sort of really thoughtful planning meetings?
It is exactly that, right? We obviously can use the data through the power of looking at, rolling 12, trend reports to understand historically what did we experience this time last year, or it's 6 months from now last year, what did this look like? And through those conversations, it helps to unpack a little bit about then where are we going? Is this something that might transpire again in the future. So
Sorry.
using the power of data and understanding some of the things like how long does it typically take us to get to an offer accept, to a start, and or what are some of the nuances by country or geo that obviously expand on that timeline, that better
Sure.
informs and also creates conversation of partnership. So it becomes, not something where we're reactionary in the space, we're being proactive and partnering and creating clarity from what we understand and what we see in the marketplace that will help hiring teams also better understand where should I go? What can we afford? And will that optimize for what we need in our organization when we go to open these requisitions up?
I like that a lot because this ties in, last month we spoke to, Harry, who was the head of recruiting at Coda. And one of the things he pointed out in our fireside chat was we need to evolve from a service model of TA to becoming a true partnership model in TA. I think the big mindset shift that happened in like 2020 and beyond as the labor markets changed was for a long time, we've been thinking about TA as like the service model. It's an SLA. I'm going to go fill jobs. I'm going to hit certain time to fill goals. I'm going to hit certain. But what you're describing is really by creating these multi-threaded views, regular check-ins. There's a genuine partnership. There's shared accountability. There's shared ownership, and it's really being part of. In many senses, the goal of go-to-market TA at Autodesk isn't how many people you fill or how the talent you acquire, but it is in meeting the revenue goals of Autodesk. Is that a fair sort of statement and phrasing?
Absolutely. And one that, we continue to recognize that, profiles will evolve and change over time. And we want to continue to stay as close to the business as possible, not only to also help build our skill set around becoming subject matter experts of that organization in the profiles that they hire to, but really helping to kind of create and curate experiences where we can continue to be best in class and provide the right level of insight and detail to what the business would want to see and hear from TA versus just reacting to the job requisition that they're telling us is on that horizon.
Mino points this out as well. Like staying close to the business is so important. The one thing that I always hear though from talent leaders is sometimes you get resistance. You get this pushback. You know, not everyone, but you're working with hiring leaders, and some leaders are like, no, leave me alone. I got, I'm going to tell you how much I need. How have you? And I'm kind of curious, even in the audience, when you're dealing with that difficult leader, we've all been there. How do you win them over into understanding the value of the partnership?
That's a great one, right? And we know that it's you kind of do a walk, jog, run approach, right? You have to first, I think, be bold and be brave. I think that's the first piece of the puzzle, and really help the leader understand when you do reach out, there's optimization of what we're here to do to support the organization over the next, let's call it 12 months. And I think when they understand that you truly care about making sure that we are being proactive partners and really leaning into them with insights, it better helps them understand that we care just as much about their bottom line as ours. And I think that what that yields in that proactiveness is, as you kind of go through the multi-threaded approach, you kind of then start to really have the real view from top to bottom, and you can really then formulate really healthy conversations and be consistent about it. You have to have a very disciplined approach on that journey, and you have to do that in a way that they also recognize that you're staying on top of it because you equally care about their organization from the talent acquisition side.
Yeah, it's about listening. And I think that's where we also make that mistake as talent acquisition professionals is if we're not using the vocabulary that our partners use, if we don't feel like we're fully aligned with their goals, it's hard to win that trust. Sometimes it feels like we're also in our own little bubble trying to kind of just solve our problems. I mean, I can't blame anyone for that because it's a lot. Like right now, I used to see you typically have a recruiter for every 5 or 6 recs. Now capacity, the way it is most TA teams are thinking 10, 15, 20 racks. That's a lot to manage. And when you think about how complex your stack is getting, how difficult it is getting, it's really, really hard to manage. There's a question in the audience that I wanted to pick up. What do you think has differentiated you in Autodesk in the market for sales reps, especially really competitive markets? And like, and especially also, I want to ask the question in the US and outside the US. So, to me, the color especially is, there is there's such an explosion of SaaS software, and now you're feeling like there's competitors in the AI space and all of these, and they're all looking for great software tech sort of sales for people. So, what do you do to kind of differentiate yourselves, differentiate your candidate experience, differentiate your brand?
I would say first, Autodesk has a really strong culture, and one that as we continue to engage with the marketplace, we love to highlight just how great the culture is here at the company. And there's multiple avenues to look at some of that data set when you look online, like places like Glassdoor, et cetera. But I
That's
think
right.
what we also firmly believe is, folks that come in and have a passion and the aptitude to sell and support our space, we firmly believe we can hire folks on potential in certain roles. And then also we look for really great folks in the marketplace that have experience that can help add value to what Autodesk wants to do over the next 3 to 5 years. And so I continue to always look at my recruiting teams to listen and understand like what excites our candidates about the company, and equally so, how are we exciting them about what their journey will look like when they get to Autodesk in a sales role.
That's actually really cool. And I've seen this. So this is very typical. So most companies are B2B companies. We're not huge customer brands. And but you're at Autodesk, but we often forget how important it is to build the employer brand. That you have to be the employer of choice. If all people know about a company is your consumer part of the brand, then as a B2B company, you often end up just competing on price. What you've done is really remarkable. You've built your Autodesk Life blog, and you talk about your culture. I saw this really nice article where you profiled like, sales leaders and at Autodesk. What do they do? How do they work? And it's about putting great content out that allows people to understand what they do. The second thing that I heard from you, Jason, was calibration. You're not always going to go after the absolute top reps and just go on a head-to-head competition with Google and Facebook and everybody else in the world. You can sometimes, but by and large, like just constantly being in a head-to-head battle for that. So you've started to have to think about calibrating your recs and looking for arbitrage opportunities in the market. Where can you train people on potential? Where can you find really great talent that is unique to you that could really work at Autodesk, but that other people might not recognize? That is remarkable. I'm really kind of curious, and that kind of gets the alignment. To me, companies that do that really well nail the intake process. They nail that initial kickoff meeting with recruiters and hiring managers and get hiring managers really, really involved. How do you do that? How do you get hiring managers really, really involved? You use Workday. It's really hard to get hiring managers really, really involved on Workday. It's beautiful software, but it's really hard to get. So how do you do that? How have you gotten hiring managers involved here?
I this past year, I think we've been on a really intentional journey to really focus our efforts on consistency of experience with hiring teams. We recognize that the candidate experience is always our number one priority and North Star to ensure we're always delivering an exceptional experience. But we also spent this last year too focusing on the hiring manager experience and really helping our recruiters deliver on really great qualitative conversation in that intake meeting where we bring together insights. We talk about what really best in class this role should look like when we're thinking about the marketplace, and even when we're thinking about the internal marketplace. Often we know some companies don't always have budget to go outside to hire, somebody to come in versus moving some of the puzzle pieces around the company to really make that organization what it needs to be for the year to come. And so we have been very much intentional on building out really great strategy meeting content that helps our recruiters go in with really thoughtful, insightful, insights that help the hiring manager have a more healthy dialogue about what they truly seek to hire for, inclusive of things like data people, where we can talk about the job posting and how we curate what we want this job to showcase to the marketplace. And that also is something that's been very much beneficial to helping us create more clarity when we're seeking some really great talent that may not be traditional talent looking at our jobs.
I love that. It's about bringing data to that conversation, to that intake meeting, bringing those tools. I love the idea that you also think, the internal talent marketplace and how important the job post is, because oftentimes we think about the employer brand, we think about our careers page. The first time a candidate is interacting with your content is often a job post on LinkedIn, a job post on Indeed. They haven't seen your careers page. So if we don't get the job post right, like your employer brand is already going to suffer out of the gate. There's a great question in the chat, which is from Christina, who asks, when there's a big lack of alignment, so you've got an employer page, your employer website that is super positive, and then you've got Glassdoor where it could be mixed. You could have an ex-employee who had a bad experience, sort of poisoning the well. But even beyond sort of poisoning the well, it's like less effusive necessarily than the controlled environment of your website. So how do you make your employer brand go beyond your company page, go beyond careers page, and actually permeate? So one part we talked about was job postings, making your employer brand, because more people look at your job post than look at your company's homepage. So let's make sure that sings your company's culture. One of the things companies forget about when they put that job posting together is they might forget to add something like who the candidate will report to or what team they're going to be a part of. When you're a large company, that is so valuable for me to know where do I fit? Or they won't talk about their benefits, but let's talk beyond that. Are there other things you do to build the brand beyond your company's website?
One that for us really, well, first I would say from the website perspective, I would recognize that this last year, we activated a really great sales sub-site within the career site. And I think that kind of helps, bring real life storytelling to the conversation about the roles we have. B, beyond the website, we curate events throughout the year to get to know Autodeskers and really meet with folks that are inside the organization across go-to-market to really have more of a fireside chat Q&A. And that also helps when we may not always have a ton of job openings in that particular division or org. Yeah. It really helps create a dialogue of getting to know Autodeskers and really understanding what drives them here, what keeps them at the company, and truly why do they love Autodesk, right? Because we recognize that folks do get reached out to throughout the year, but there's a lot of great continuity in our folks staying in the company and wanting to thrive and grow here. And I think those are those special moments throughout the year that we've either done on our own or we've activated with a partner to really help us tell that authentic story.
I like that a lot. And could those events just be virtual events too? So for folks in our audience who may not have the budget to do in-person events in different places, could you just put together great virtual events for the candidates in your pipeline or for your prospecting pools?
Absolutely. And we just hosted one, not even, I think, 3 weeks ago, if my brain can remember right, from Barcelona. But we hosted one all on our own, and we curated it with our sourcing team. They helped us to really think about the roles that we know are going to be coming on the horizon over the next 3 to 12 months. And the great thing about that is we had just fantastic RSVPs. It was not a hard lift. We partnered with the business and wanted to bring in folks to be part of this fireside chat that have also been on a career journey at the company, both earlier in career, a bit more mid management or mid level, because we recognize that people thrive in knowing how can I learn and grow across this space if I come into an Autodesk. And when you can kind of create those real moments, I call them, I think that helps candidates say, I want to be part of this company, or I want to join this division within this company because I feel like I can not only belong, but I can thrive and grow here over time.
I love that term, real moments, Jason. And that's like, it is authenticity that we crave these days more than ever. Actually, one of the really nice things I liked about this idea of having these events is when you think back to earlier in our conversation, we talked about the resistance you get and how do you bring hiring managers and the hiring teams into the loop. And one great way is to spotlight them. Like nothing activates partnership as much as when you actually showcase the great work they do at your company. You make them the heroes of this journey. And I think, you know, and when you make, and by TA, by helping, our hiring managers become those heroes, effectively, allows us to build that partnership more effectively down the line. So I really like that point. So actually, one of the things you've done really uniquely, even when I think about the way you rolled out data people, you were very clear. I wanted to go out to all of my hiring managers, not just recruiters. And we see it done both ways, but we're always amazed when companies say, I want hiring managers to be in the driver's seat of recruiting. I want them to own the JD. I want them to own the intake meeting. We will support and facilitate. And you've actually and that takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of effort and handholding. And you've done that really well. And even when you rolled out today, I think data people gets used by hundreds of hiring managers. One of the features we rolled out was a commenting and collaboration feature just a month ago. And already we're seeing hiring managers like engaging on, is this the right skill? Is this the right type of, am I using the right templates? How do you activate that type of behavior at Autodesk? Like, did it come organically? Is there something you did to push it along?
Of course, our communications teams are a big part of our support journey. And we recognize that, as we created kind of our go out strategy, we wanted things to feel like this was not a heavy lift. And through that, we created templates of engagement when we would reach out to hiring teams and let them know what we're doing and what we're going to need their partnership on through this journey. And so when I think about the early days, it was thinking about having a centralized resource page for all the great things to learn about data people that were easy nuggets to consume, nothing that was heavy. We also then thought about post-activation. What's really important is to make sure we allow space for questions and created office hours to check in with the business to know we're here for you throughout the next 3 to 6 months to make sure we're here to help. We can do live screen sharing. We can do some real-time, support. And then we also thought, let's really be smart about creating templates for roles that we know will typically rinse and repeat throughout a calendar year. If we recognize that throughout go-to-market, we always have roles that come online on a consistent basis, let's start to curate really great job posting templates. So not only do you think about the ease of creating the next requisition in Workday to use a template versus having to start from scratch, this is helping us just optimize that experience that hiring managers have, because we saw that so many hiring teams often love to grab that job description from 3-4 years ago because some have not had to hire, obviously in more recent times. And so by kind of helping to bring to life a new job posting and a new concept of thinking around things like data people to help support that, this has enabled hiring managers to be more excited about using the tool, having that really qualitative experience with a recruiter, and working together in collaboration with things like the commenting. That's an amazing feature that we're starting to see folks activate into.
I like that. I like the office hours. I like the activation. And I like that willingness to consider the hiring manager a true partner. Too often I see two big problems. One is recruiters want to have as much control as possible. The TA team tries to, so they say, you know what, we will talk to you, but we will own the writing, we will own the job posting. The problem is then when you turn around in the interview process and say, hiring manager, take charge, build empathy, lead the process, suddenly that feels inauthentic because they haven't been in charge the whole time. The second thing actually is a very tactical point. One of the things I noticed with your jobs that is you don't make the mistake a lot of teams do in sales recruiting. In sales recruiting, too often I see jobs that are so generic and underqualified. Like we'll have one real qualification that is 4 years of quota carrying sales experience, and then nothing. And not every sales role is the same. You've got enterprise roles, you've got field roles, you've got SaaS roles, you've got sort of big implementation services. So, the sales motion changes, the type of thing we're selling changes, the type of sales stack we use changes, the modality of the organization, all of those things matter. And I don't think we don't make those explicit in our job descriptions. We don't provide clarity often. And then the sales recruiter is sifting through resumes without a good framework. With Autodesk, I noticed you put a lot of clarity in the JD. You kind of calibrate the JD. And the only way to do that is to get the hiring managers involved in that process early by really getting them to articulate, what do you want? I'm curious, how do you then push back on them when they say, I want 75 different things? And that creates like the potential versus the performance. Like, how do you kind of balance that? Because earlier in the conversation, you're talking about looking for that arbitrage where I want people who have the potential to learn some things, even if they don't have that experience already.
Yeah, it's definitely a journey. I will say that. We definitely recognize that we've come into this, with a great conversation that first we won't post that job number one until we have that strategy meeting. That is a key component to this journey, and inclusive of using data people. And we recognize that that is where we can create the clarity around, let's talk about these 10 bullets you have in the requirement section. Let's really ask ourselves, can we find this in a job, in a resume? If I look for this, will I see this? As easily determining, yes, next steps, we can find that. Number two, I think for us is really articulating, is this a hard skill that they need to have in this particular role? Is this a soft skill or a skill that can be learned over the next 3 to 6 months? And we recognize that throughout various teams, there's going to be a set of requirements in certain parts of our sales organization or across go-to-market that are pretty non-negotiable. They need to have X, Y, or Z. And we recognize that that's totally fair. But we also optimize for, let's zoom out for a minute and tell you what the marketplace tells us. If you want this doesn't exactly map to what the marketplace has as an easy go find. So we need to talk about what you're really looking for, create that clarity, and hopefully push that bullet either out or refine it in such a way that we are being very clear on what we absolutely are needing in terms of that experience.
And I appreciate the term clarity because that's the most important. We're not, our goal in the hiring process is actually, if we have clarity, we don't even need to do that for self-selection. There's plenty of great candidates, there's plenty of great jobs. It's really allowing people to self-select into the right types of roles at our organizations, especially at Autodesk. You've got lots and lots of roles. And so often, sometimes the noise in your candidate pipeline is somebody who's selected themselves into a role that's too junior or too senior or not the right fit. You really want them to help find it. So I want to turn around. We've talked about building the foundations of a great process. We've talked about engaging the hiring managers. Now I kind of want to ask you metrics. You are running these QBRs at different levels. What are the metrics you're presenting? What are the metrics you're paying attention to? Because recruiting is full of metrics. My God, there's so many metrics. But what 2 or 3 do you really fixate on in driving sort of value?
Two for us, one that's very important is obviously time to offer accept. And what we love to look at is this year versus last year. And even sometimes we have to go 2 years back. And I think that's important because we recognize that, in 2023, a lot of companies went through a lot of start, stop, continue in their recruitment motions as we had some of the economic friction globally. That's one for us that is very much important because we recognize
so I'm going to pause you there, Jason. Time to offer accept, it's time from the candidate applying to the candidate accepting the offer. So it's like a modified time to hire metric.
Correct, correct. And we do recognize and can see time to fill in totality, but we also though have to recognize that obviously from an offer accept to a start, there's going to be nuance by geo, backgrounds, et cetera, background checks, et cetera,
Yeah,
that obviously are going to impact that number.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
Number two for us is really days open. I think that's also very important. We recognize that when you have requisitions that linger in age, you start to, create a little bit of, unknown. Like, is this job still hot? Are they really still looking for folks for this role? So I think that's another metric that we pay attention to because we recognize
yeah.
that the marketplace is looking at our roles. And then when they see something that's been out there for 90 days or longer, then maybe they've lost interest and maybe we haven't done our part in our hygiene of keeping that requisition, posted or unposted to really ensure we're,
Yeah.
we're really that right level of clarity.
I love the days open because one of the things that I think we also forget is a lot of the search engines that you rely on, LinkedIn, Indeed, they prioritize newer, fresher content, newer, fresher jobs for their talent base. And so you start to get like these drop off in your candidate pipelines the longer the job stays open, because they're not serving up those jobs as much. And then part of the reason they do that is so that you can spend more promoting your jobs on LinkedIn and Indeed, and suddenly your recruitment marketing spend is going up. It's just wasteful. It's easier and cheaper to just take the job down, rethink it, and then put it back up again, with changes so that it shows up as a fresh job and gives you a better chance of working it. I'm very curious about the time to offer, accept, and time to hire. I love that metric, and I actually love the metric over time to fill for two reasons. One is it's a cleaner metric, so um, you don't end up with the noise at the front end, like how long it takes to get finance to approve your rec, showing, changing the metric around for you, creating noise in the metric, but also the time to offer, accept not only encapsulates the efficiency of your process, but it's also effectively encapsulating the candidate experience. And that's such an important facet. And I love how you use that. So are you looking at that year over year, quarter over quarter? Like how, when does it start to worry you?
Yeah, I would say we absolutely do look at it year over year. I think that's important. But also recognizing that quarter over quarter is equally important because we do know that there are dynamics throughout a calendar year that can impact our slowdown in process flows, right? The holidays
Yeah.
typically kind of take us through that extended journey of getting folks into the company and following up. So I think that that's what today we look at it from the kind of multiple angles on that time comparative storyline, and one that helps us have more enriched conversation with hiring leaders, hiring teams, and that way we can kind of unpack why does it take us this long to fill this job? What can we do moving into the back half of the year or going forward to optimize for a reduction of 15 to 21 days, right? Let's call it. So we kind of look at that data set and or when it's extremely favorable versus the previous year, what are we doing this year that we weren't doing last year that's helping us on that journey? And that can be a multitude
That's
of
right.
things that we're doing with the business to help drive at that.
I love that. There's a great question in the audience that talks about candidate pools. So are you actively creating candidate pools of, talent? Do you then reach out to people who've applied to jobs in the past or in your candidate pool, engage them with content? Is that something you do? Do you use a CRM to do that?
We do have candidate pools and we do use a CRM. We today at Autodesk we use Beamery as our CRM for candidate management behind the scenes. And that helps us really fine tune when we're looking for candidates. We can do some great searching in that tool. We have limitations on the workday front. Beamery's been a really great conduit for that to help our recruiters really move more quickly into looking at historical requisitions or talent with specific keywords that we know we're optimizing for with the requisition that they're currently working through.
That makes a ton of sense. So I'm kind of curious. My last point that I wanted to talk about, Jason, was building in DE&I and candidate empathy into your processes. Because I think one of the things that kind of goes hand in hand with a great hiring process is building habits around inclusive hiring all the way through, and rather than sort of hacks. And you've done that really well, but you do that in a challenge where you're actually trying to get hiring managers to own so much more of the process than the typical company. So I'm kind of curious, how how has DE&I made it through into the recruiting process for you? And how have you engaged your hiring managers on that journey?
The great thing at Autodesk is we do have a plethora of resources around hiring at the company and thinking with an inclusive lens through a multitude of training seminar, training sessions they can attend virtually, being a new hiring manager at the company, what to expect, how to go through the process of looking at, your team and what to be thinking about when you hire that next position. And I think that we also have initiatives that the business helps talent acquisition work through that drives at things around DE&I. When we think about hiring more diverse talent into the company, we have initiatives that are helping to drive at that. And through the way in which that's communicated to hiring teams, they fully understand it is a team sport. Both talent acquisition and the organization are equally at the head to focus on how we can diversify our sales teams or our go-to-market teams more broadly with some of those initiatives and support mechanisms behind it to drive at it.
But it's about the habits. And I like that it's about what you're trying to do, firstly, is open up the funnel as much as you can so that great candidates, regardless of background, come in and you have a more representative talent pipeline. And so that puts so much less pressure on things like sourcing and those are areas. Like, I think it puts a lot of pressure on TA teams when they're asked to go and source candidates to make up, to make the candidate pipeline feel representative and be diverse. And if the more you can do systematically to open up, the more investments you can do in your employer brand, the more investments you can do with job descriptions, with hiring managers, all of those things end up being more systematic ways to bring representation into your talent pipelines.
Agreed. Agreed. And I'd couple that with that strategy meeting piece of it for our recruiting teams is a very critical point in that juncture where we don't just go and post the job and get going. We lean in to understand more about the profile or the specific backfill, or if this is a new headcount we're adding to the team. We talk about team dynamics, like what does your team look like today? Where do they sit? How do they work through one another, right? And that helps us also think about the journey of how we look at the diversity and inclusion lens of that organization or that specific team when we're about to embark on that recruitment cycle.
That's exactly right. So I want to bring our conversation back to one of the earlier things we talked about. We talked about sort of the talent maturity model, and we talked about how you had made the leap from being stage two, which is standardization, to stage three, which is data driven and sort of analytical and evidence based. And if you remember, stage four was a question mark. And I would say we're we're in such a dynamic world with AI, with all of the changes and trends, distributed hiring, where stage four is different for every company and every talent leader. So I'm kind of curious for you, after you've solved the evidence-based hiring, what's the next level up for talent maturity for your organization? Where do you want to, what do you aspire to see in your organization?
I would say we aspire that there is more self-servicing available to both hiring teams and even for talent acquisition. We recognize that there is a plethora of tools out there that we can utilize every single day, but we also want hiring teams to be able to also self-service and utilize tools, example, a data people all on their own before they ever even think about opening the requisition in Workday as an example, because that also helps them understand that they're taking the driver's seat on some of that process and putting some ease in their own system because it helps them self-reflect in that own regard. What does it look like to, like when I hired this last job? Like how long did it take or how many applicants did we get? And that might help also create a different conversation when they engage with recruiting to say, I've also reflected on the fact that this job took us a long time to fill last time, and we weren't very inclusive in our job posting. So I'm doing my part to be that proactive partner to you before I ever get going. So self-servicing is something that we aspire more and more of, and especially in the world where we can utilize tools and technology and even the power of AI to help with some of that. That's obviously that's going to be a very new journey for so many folks in and outside of our own company. But it's one that definitely is top of mind for everyone today is how can things like AI or tools that are self-serviceable help enable and drive efficiencies?
I like that idea of self-service so much. And I'm seeing this with, I think the most thoughtful companies are recognizing we want hiring managers want agency in this process. And self-service is, not only a way to give them an enormous amount of agency, but actually brings so much efficiency to your recruiting team that's no longer having to babysit hiring managers or babysit like internal bureaucracy, right? So much of our time in recruiting is like, send me the latest template or these back and forths of email documents or where's my rec at? And what you're painting is a vision of the world where a hiring manager can get answers to a lot of their questions instantly without having to bother a recruiter. And recruiters can manage to focus their time on candidates, which is what they thought why we all get attracted to recruiting in the first place. And in that, we can create a really good partnership between the two because you're no longer relying on each other for basic stuff. We're starting to talk strategy. We're freeing ourselves up to be strategic. So I really like that. Jason, these are incredible tips, and we've really learned so much. With the last 4 minutes, I just wanted to give our audience just a little bit about what Data People is. You've heard a lot about it today, even in Jason's conversation. Just want to share a little bit about what we do and how we solve things for our customers. Wait a second, where am I? Sorry, let me share my screen and just get back to it. And so Data People is a comprehensive platform for hiring fairness and efficiency. We do two great things. We're an intelligent editor that hiring managers and recruiters collaborate with to write really effective, inclusive job descriptions. You heard from Jason about how you're building this into the strategy meeting right up front, the kickoff meeting. This is what they're using. And then on the back half, there's actionable insights that track things like time to hire, your funnel metrics, gender diversity, and really instrument a data-driven process. And the goal that we see is the vision is very similar to the vision you heard from Jason, which is how do we make it as easy as possible for recruiters and hiring managers to collaborate and for hiring managers to really self-serve and self-access a lot of the great parts so they can be true partners in your recruiting process. We're used in over 80 countries around the world by thousands of professionals, both hiring managers and recruiters. We've got what we're trying to do is give you access and intelligence and control over the entire hiring process. Works great with every ATS. We work really, really closely with systems like Workday that Autodesk and Jason use, but we work with almost every major ATS on the planet. And hundreds of customers use us, love us, see why it sort of is the powerful tool that it can be. That's the end of my commercial. But what I want to offer all of you is a process audit. We've been offering this up to prospects. We were happy to do one for you. If you're curious about where you can find efficiencies in your hiring process, email us. We're going to put some notes in the chat. You get a follow-up email. And we'd love to sort of run an audit for you and identify places where you can supercharge your hiring using data and learn a little bit about your processes in that way. Well, that's all we got. Any last words, Jason, before we let people go for the week?
No, thank you again for the time and the opportunity to speak with you today. I mean, I really appreciate it as always.
Thank you, Jason. It was mind-blowing. One of my favorite calls of the week, and I learned so much. For the audience folks who joined and who asked all these amazing questions, thank you. Have a wonderful week and don't hesitate to reach out. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Jason.
Thanks.